Good afternoon, dear children. In the previous three classes, we have learnt about weathering, especially what is the processes of weathering. Now, weathering is the process by which rocks on the land surface break down or crumble because of the action of the elements of weather, such as rain, frost, temperature, and because of which the rocks disintegrate and they are called weather. This is called weathering of the rocks. Now what is it forming? It is forming the soil. So today we will continue ahead with the soil formation, soil profile, and the soil erosion, and along with that we'll study about the ways of the conservation of soil erosion. In the previous three classes for which we have done this chapter, we've studied about the physical, chemical, and the biological processes of weathering, which are actually leading to the formation of soil. Now, the effect of weathering is to produce a layer of loose materials on the surface of the earth, which is actually called soil. So, weathering is the basic to the process of soil formation. Now, these weathered particles are carried by the river, wind, and the other agents, and they form the tools for their erosional work. Now, here I have written a few pointers for you to understand that soil formation is a very slow process because it's not happening within half an hour or one overnight. As we have actually studied about the weathering processes of the rocks due to the various processes like your biological, physical, and your chemical processes. All these processes that you have learned, you have understood that this process of soil formation or the weathering of the rocks is a very slow process. Therefore, soil will automatically will take thousands of years to form, and just a few centimeters of soil we are talking about. We're not talking about the entire soil expanse or the layers of the soil which have formed the upper crust of the earth. Now, soil, as we have already discussed, it is formed by the weathering of rocks, and the agents of erosion lead to the gradation and distribute the minerals in the soil. Now, this is actually very beneficial because minerals which are not even present in that area, if the rock has weathered in a particular area and it contained a few minerals, now the water has eroded those weathered particles of the rock along with it, and the minerals are carried along from 1 mile or the one corner to the other corner of the area or to an entirely different location, leading to the uh, enrichment of that particular area in the mineral which it was not there originally, because the parent rock did not have those minerals, but the erosional features actually helped it to be carried along. Now, what is the composition of the soil? That means what all does the soil contain? The soil consists of the mineral particles, moisture. Now, what is moisture? Water vapor from the air also, and water which is there, which is being oozed out by the um, microorganisms also present there, and the living organisms like bacteria, earthworms, and decayed organic matter. All of that is present in the soil. That means that is the content of the soil or the composition of the soil. Now, here we've understood that weathering forms the soil, and the soil has minerals which are either present in the present location or are carried by the erosional agents. But if I simply ask you, why is soil one of the most important resources of for the human beings? Then what do we understand by it? I would request everybody to open their books to page 61 and mark it. Here it's written, it is one of the most important resources as human beings depend on it both directly and indirectly for their basic needs like food, shelter, and clothing. We all know the cotton pod that we are growing is from the soil, so we are getting our clothes from the soil. Even if we are wearing silk or woolen, everything is coming from the soil because the worms are also dependent on the soil, and the leaves, whatever they are eating, is coming from the soil. Even the houses, every article made in your house is from the soil itself. So what are we? Nothing apart from soil. At the end of this PPT, I've added a very beautiful song that We are just the soil, and we are 99.9% of our formation is soil, apart from water, earth, and the other element. But then most of us is only soil. Next comes the soil profile. Now, what is the meaning of the word soil profile? First, we need to understand that. Now, soil profile is section of the earth showing the successive layers of the soil. Now, if you just imagine which would appear if you cut straight down into the soil. Here, I've given you a picture of a cake. That means we're just imagining this portion to be the earth in the whole. But then, if we cut it down in a vertical manner, and we tend to see look at we're just going to pull out this portion and see the layers, and even in the portion that you pulled out, you can see the layers completely defined clearly, and this is showing the entire soil profile, that is which layer is above which layer. And this can only be seen if you just the vertical section of the soil arrangement, if you can be seen if you cut it down in a vertical manner. So here we clearly see that the layers are arranged horizontally, but if you need to see the profile, that means all the layers together, you have to cut it down vertically. And this vertical section is called the soil profile. Kindly learn the definition and the meaning clearly. Here, children, you need to understand that the soil occurs in the horizontal layers. But these horizontal layers, one on top of the other, these horizontal layers become clearly visible when a vertical section of the soil is exposed by cutting it down in a straight or a vertical manner. And this vertical section is called the soil profile. Now moving ahead with the soil profile or the layers of the soil. Now you would also think that why are we cutting the soil vertically and looking at the soil profile? Because we want to study about the soil. That is why it is easier to view and study the soil in a profile manner or in a side view, if you can just call it, understand it in a simpler terms. Now, sometimes the soil profiles are also exposed in the mining areas and while the road is being cut, and then you can also see that one below the other, there is some distinction of the color and the size of the particles which are present there. So that is what is basically which we are going to study. Children, in some of the Google searches or in other books also, you might find various labelings given to the same diagram of a soil profile. Now, those are not wrong. Sometimes they call it O horizon, A horizon, and the meeting points, or whatever they were calling it, it is absolutely correct. But don't get confused. Please learn these four basic distinct layers, because this is your first chapter on soil. We will be studying soil in class 10 also. But let's understand that a typical soil profile shows four distinct layers. Now each layer is distinct from the other by its color and size of the particles. Now here we see in the topsoil. Now the top layer consists of fine particles and organic matters. Now from the decayed remains of the plants and other animals called the humus. Now this layer, now we are talking about this portion. The entire black portion you can see or call it as topsoil. But the topmost portion of the topsoil, which contains the decayed remains of plants and other organisms, thus called humus. Now you need to mark your definition of humus in your books also. Kindly open to page number 62. Just above the diagram, you have the definition that humus is the decomposed organic matter obtained from the dead animal and plant remains that make the soil profile. Make the soil profile topmost portion very fertile. The next soil or the soil below the topsoil is the subsoil. Now subsoil contains the materials removed from the top layer or the percolated material which has seeped in through the water or some holes, and it is usually composed of very fine particles, and it is more compact than the upper layer, that is the topsoil layer. It's more compact. That means it is the grains are sticking to each other in a more compact or a more compacted manner. Now here we should understand that the third layer is the weathered rock, that is below the subsoil, that is a zone of partly weathered rocks. Partly weathered rocks, why are we calling it partly weathered rock area? Because the rocks have not broken down completely. They are partially broken or half broken. Now this is also it also does not contain humus at all. In this layer, as you see, that there are some fine black particles, but in this layer you will not find any humus content because the humus has not percolated. Why? Because the layer above, as I had emphasized 6-7 times, that it is more compact and it will not allow the seepage or the passing of the materials from the layer above up till the third layer, that is the partly weathered rock. And because the rocks are mostly in the solid form here, we said partly, that means partially only they have broken, so they will also not allow any percolation of the humus content up till this layer. Now this layer is the first stage in the soil formation process and eventually forms the above two layers. Now the soil in the above two layer comes from this layer itself. Now here the last one which we need to mention is the fourth layer is the unweathered rock. That means the parent rock. Now in the diagram also is clearly written the parent rock or the basic rock which is present out there. Now it provides the mineral content of the soil. Now when this profile, now first we just mentioned, we understood about all the soils in the layer formation. Now we need to understand how we came up to the first layer. Now this was the parent rock. It gradually broke down, but this layer has only partially broken rocks in it. But whatever was broken down or the eroded material which was brought down up to this area got mixed up and formed the subsoil. Now the topsoil was basically formed with the mixture of the topsoil, subsoil and the humus, which is actually very helpful for the agriculture and the growth of plants. Now this is your flow chart, how it is formed. Topsoil, subsoil, weathered rocks and parent rock. This is your basic formation of the soil profile. Next comes the components of soil. What is the importance of each particle present in the soil? Now what? Topsoil, subsoil, weathered rocks and parent rock. This is your basic formation of the soil profile. Next comes the components of soil. What is the importance of each particle present in the soil? Now, what is the mineral content going to do? The clay and the sand, which is containing minerals like your silica, iron, magnesium, potassium, calcium, etc., are necessary for the healthy growth of the plant. So now we know the importance of the mineral contents or the particles. In the book also it has only been mentioning clay and sand, sand and clay. Now these are the basic ones, but then we need to understand what all minerals the clay and the sand contain. Then comes your humus. We have already discussed, it is made up of organic matter like the decayed leaves, minute bacteria, earthworms, animals which are decayed or died or dead out there. Now it provides nitrogen. Now what all is it providing? It is providing nitrogen, which is very essential for the healthy growth of the plants. In chemistry also you've studied about it, and in biology also the role of nitrogen cycle in the growth of plants. Then we have moisture. Now plants can absorb nutrients from the soil only if they are in solution. That is, if they are dissolved in water. Now even in your potted plants, if you just keep adding minerals and do not add water to the soil, will it be able to give the nutrient to the plant? No. Why? Because unless and until the nutrient or the mineral content is in the soluble form, the soil or sorry the plant cannot absorb the nutrient from the soil, because that is where the roots are literally sucking up all the nutrients through the solution which the water is providing by mixing itself into the minerals which are present in the soil. Next comes air, that is oxygen circulating in the soil is required for the respiration of soil organism. Even in your potted plants, you must have seen the gardener or your parents actually, or even they have must have asked you to just do some tilling out on the topsoil. That means they are allowing the air to reach the roots, because if the roots are not able to breathe, they'll die. Therefore, the plant will also die. You must have heard the Mali Bhaiya doing some gudai, right? That is the term which you must have heard. That is the opening up of the topsoil, which gets compacted due to the compaction of the entire atmosphere. Simply gets compacted because the clay and the sand, they all just join together, all the particles, and they do not allow the air to go down at times. So once a week or twice a week, it is very necessary to make sure that the roots are getting enough air or oxygen to breathe so that they can grow. Next comes your soil erosion. Now, what is the meaning of the word soil erosion? Let us mark it in our books. Here, page number 65, in the important terms, you need to mark the definition. The washing away or removal of the layer of soil by various agents like running water and wind is known as soil erosion. Now, that was soil erosion. But what is the basic term of erosion? What is the meaning? So here it is the process by which the weathered materials are transported elsewhere by agents like running water, moving ice, waves and wind. Simply, as I had shown it to you in your previous class with the experiment, how the water carried along with itself the loose particles, that is erosion. Erosion has already been explained to you. Here, when we are talking about the soil erosion, it is the washing away of the top layers of the soil. Here in these pictures, it's very clearly visible as from wherever the water has run through, it has created a loss of the topsoil. Here you can see such a huge ridge has been created because of the constant flow of the water in a particular area. It has been able to cut through the second subsoil also. Under soil erosion, we need to understand that we basically have the sheet erosion and the gully erosion. Now, the pictures I have shown you to understand what is a sheet erosion and a gully erosion, but I would prefer everybody to mark it in their books very, very clearly. Here you can underline this. When there is heavy rainfall, the top layers of soil over a large area gets washed away. This is known as sheet erosion. Here in this picture, you can clearly see the entire layer, the top layer, just like the sheet. You've seen your bed sheets, right? Where the sheet is a thin layer, that means the top layer. Exactly like you have a bed, you have a entire Dunlop, and then on top of that, you have a bed sheet. Now, if you remove the sheet, what are you doing? You are removing the top layer. Exactly in the same manner, when the water just passes through an area, it washes along or carries along with it a thin layer of soil. That is your sheet erosion. Secondly, it says the gully erosion, that when rainwater in a region flows down the slopes making deep and narrow furrows. Please make sure you circle it and learn it. Deep and narrow furrows are made. It is called gully erosion. Now, gully is a Hindi term. You must have seen those thin lanes are called gullies. Exactly like that, in this also you can see the thin lanes which have been formed because of the erosion through water, and this has created the gullies. Now, these gullies, when they are formed, they are known as gully erosion. The biggest disadvantage of this is that such gullies make the land unfit for cultivation and result in the formation of bad lands. So, if I ask you the question, how are bad lands formed? You will have to explain me the formation of gully erosion, which is causing the area or making the area a bad land area. Now, the most simplest example of this is the Chambal Valley of Madhya Pradesh, and you might have seen in many movies also the Chambal Valley is shown where the dacoits are hiding themselves, and Those are the areas in this kind of an area. If you zoom this picture when you are watching it again, the PPT is being sent to you, please clearly watch, and therefore you'll understand the soil erosion and the formation of the badlands. Also, the soil erosion also refers to the loss of fertility of soil. Now, this is what is making it unfit for cultivation. And therefore, the soil is infertile and exhausted because the top layer, which had the maximum nutrients, has been washed off. Now, here are the four basic reasons or the causes of soil erosion. Number one, deforestation, overgrazing of land, improper farming techniques, floods, and torrential rains. Now, these are not mentioned in your book, but they have mentioned the ways to conserve the soil. Now, if there are ways to conserve the soil, there has to be the causes also, no? So, we need to learn the causes before we learn how to rectify or conserve the soil or stop it from soil erosion. As we all know, wind and water are very powerful agents of soil erosion, and they have the ability to remove the soil and transport it. So, wind erosion is very significant in the desert and the semi-desert area because there is no vegetation to stop it, and heavy rainfall and steep slopes are common in those areas. You have the role of water, that is the running water, which is more significant. Now, the soil erosion takes place when the soil is removed faster than it is formed. Now, that is also a very important point for us to remember. While doing the causes of soil erosion, we understand deforestation. It is the removal of trees and other vegetation which hold the soil together. Thus, in their absence, they are going to get eroded very easily. Overgrazing of land by animals result in the removal of grass over a large area, making it easy for the wind and running water to remove the soil. Then we have the improper farming techniques, that is plowing fields in the traditional and up down manner along the slope make it very easy for the running water and the wind to cause erosion. So we will learn about the correct techniques of farming which can actually help in conserving the soil or stop soil erosion. Then we have floods and torrential rains, another very blatant cause of soil erosion. They cause severe damage because when they are moving, they're not only taking the topsoil, they are moving most of the second subsoil also. The action of heavy rainfall is very strong, and when there are no trees and the plains are completely bare, they are actually the entire sheet erosion is taking place, and the ground gets very hard and the soil is unable to absorb the water easily also after the sheet erosion has taken place. Now, the ways of conservation of soil also include the same points, but the efficient farming techniques have to be explained, which I will do in the next class. Today, we are just learning the understanding the subheadings. Afforestation, just the reverse of deforestation, that is the planting of trees and the other vegetation on the hill slopes and the uncultivated land is done, and which is going to help the roots are going to help the hold the soil together. Second one is the restricted grazing of animals should be practiced. That means animals should be moved over different pastoral areas so as to avoid the removal of all vegetation from one particular ground. Then comes your efficient farming techniques. Number one is your contour plying. Now that should be practiced along the outline of the field in a circular manner. I'll be showing you pictures in the next class, but here we need to understand this prevents the soil from being washed away by the running water. Then is your terrace farming. Now that is very effective in controlling soil erosion. Terracing is cutting into the hill slopes in a series of large steps made up of flat fields. Then we have the strip cropping. Now, this strip cropping is the planting of alternate rows of different kinds of crops instead of leaving strips of land uncultivated in between. Then we have the contour bunding. Now here the fields and boundaries are effective in reducing the soil erosion. Bunds are low mud walls. What are bunds? Low mud walls or embankments that help to obstruct the flow of water. Now, what is going to happen? If they are going to obstruct it, water is not going to carry the soil along with it. Simple. The last one is the flood control that can easily be done by the dams and the multi-purpose projects. Now, here we are finishing with the chapter, but I will be doing the methods of soil conservation in the next class in detail again. If you have any doubts, please revise the entire chapter and ask. Thank you.